Welcome to Live.Laugh.Launch, the go-to-market podcast for everyone who brings products to life. I'm Katie Moss, and whether you're leading strategy, building campaigns, designing experiences, or figuring out how all the pieces fit together, this show is for you. We explore every angle of go-to-market success, from the big picture thinking to the nitty-gritty execution. Each episode dives into what really works, what doesn't, and how cross-functional teams collaborate to turn ideas into market wins. If you're in marketing, building a startup, or just fascinated by how great products find their audience, you're in the right place. Let's launch into it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Live.Laugh.Launch. Today, I have Larissa Licha with us, and she is a product and technical leader with over a decade of experience in AI, machine learning, and SaaS. She's now co-founded two companies, Joyn, an AI-powered collaboration platform, and baselayr, an AI infrastructure company that helps teams build reliable, context-aware AI systems. Larissa's work centers on bridging the gap between people and technology, creating tools that make collaboration smarter, simpler, and more human. So thank you so much for joining, Larissa. Super excited to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So I originally met you when you were starting Joyn and you were doing some research around how product marketers would use the product. I'd love to just, put your story out there for everyone. So what led you to start Joyn originally?
Yeah. Well, for Joyn, obviously we were really again focused on like collaboration between teams, and I found myself sitting on all the teams throughout my career in tech. I was like in support, I was in sales, I was in account management, I was in then product, and then I was more in a GM role, and then I was managing ops teams. And I think in all of these roles that I sat in, like one of the most important things was like understanding the other teams and how they work and what they're up to, because there's obviously always cross-team dependencies. But as sort of like tools blew up and was like scattered everywhere, sometimes it was in people's brains, sometimes it was like in a combination of like Jira and GitHub and Slack, and it just became like a total nightmare, even just like figure out the most simple thing, like what's the most recent like update with this feature release. Like you sort of had to pick 5 people and like lurk in I don't know how many spreadsheets to figure that out. So the motivation really came from, this has gotten really hard. Like software is great. And again, it comes back to like bridging people in tech, but it also makes it harder to work with each other. So that was really the motivation behind what we've built with Joyn, was like, okay, how can we package up all the context that's scattered across systems and make sure that, go-to-market teams know what's happening in R&D, and R&D teams know what's happening in go-to-market teams. And if you're executive, you generally know what's going on. And I managed product ops, and they were doing this like by hand, and it was just like frustrating. Constantly had to ping people, and it was just like nonstop. So that was sort of the motivation behind Joyn. And obviously, us having been in AI machine learning for so long, we spent so much of our career trying to have data structured in a way that it makes sense to AI systems, and then have non-structured data structured in a way that it makes sense for language models. So that's been like our life for a long time. So we just saw an opportunity there around like the pain, and then our experience and our knowledge of how to build systems for this. And then obviously with generative AI coming around, we sort of knew that generative AI and AI agents and assistants are only as good as their context. And like we're also seeing that today, that it's not often that good when we're still interacting with AI and AI agents, because we're still struggling on the context side. So that's sort of what led us there. It's like really our own work experiences, and then, also just seeing like a broader need in the market to help these teams work better together, and not being like a big cost center to the organization purely because of like communication breakdown.
Yeah, it's definitely a pain I have felt as well, a need I have felt as well. And lots of companies need that, I think, for a multitude of reasons. And sometimes it's because data lives in a whole bunch of different places, including people's brains. For example, I'm covering for a company right now for a product launch. Someone's out on maternity leave, so they lost their product marketing person, all that stuff in her brain. So yeah, I can definitely see the pain that you're addressing there. So recently you pivoted and you started baselayr AI as well. So
At what point did you sense the need to do that? And how did you know it was time to do so?
Yeah. So we sort of had a realization. A lot of our customers on the Joyn side tried other tools before Joyn, whether it's like a Glean, Interpret, whatever it is. If they try to build something out themselves with like Google's Gemini, like they've all had experiences and they've all sort of have been burned by the accuracy or like complexity of those tools to make them work and like keep them up to date because they retrieve data, but that means it's only as good as whatever they're retrieving and how up to date it is. And we all know how bad people are with documentation. It's a nightmare, especially with things again changing so fast, right? Especially on like the product side. So we really saw an opportunity there because like as customers use Joyn, they were like, wow, this is like the first time this thing is accurate for me and that it's actually helpful. And we've had like 0% churn. And then we saw that our customers were starting to build out their own AI assistants and agents. So they started having teams trying to sort of structure data for, LLMs, whether it's for their like chat bots on their website, whether it's to push stuff into intercom that they were using. And we just saw that they had a really hard time because those are non-AI native companies building for AI, which requires expertise. So we're like, how about we just use our infrastructure to power this? So we sort of, we already did this. We already did the pulling in data, packaging it up for LLMs, just with the specific use case of Joyn. And it was really just pointing it at, okay, what data do we now need to package up for structured and unstructured data to power the AI assistants and agents that their customers interact with? So it was sort of like a natural pull. We also had these larger enterprise companies reach out to us more from an M&A perspective, being like, oh, we're really struggling building out our AI agents. It's hard to hire for. So are you open for M&A? And we're like, no, but are you open to use our infrastructure? And then we started spinning out POCs. So it was sort of more of like a natural evolution of what we've already built with Joyn and just applying it to a different use case now that all these companies have to deliver on AI. But again, struggling, which then hurts trust with customers or means you're never converting pilots or whatever it is, right? Or you need to hire all these teams to just keep your knowledge base up to date, which is another cost center. So that's where sort of like the shift happened. It was like, oh, there's something there that we should explore. Started doing some early exploration, got a lot of pull, and we're like, all right, let's spin this out of Joyn and sell our infrastructure that we've been building for the past like 4 years or so.
Yeah, and I guess the other alternative is just like buying a whole bunch of different disparate tools that are purpose made for these things. So I can see how the infrastructure would be helpful. How did you validate early demand for Joyn, and how did those learnings carry over or not carry over into baselayr AI?
Yeah, it was actually interesting because we were sort of at this like inflection point. We kind of built the thing, but we didn't really get the pull that we needed. And that's sort of where Techstars came into our lives. And Techstars was a really good forcing function for us to just honestly be like, scrap it. Like, never mind anything we've done. Never mind anything we should target. Never mind the problem we thought we were solving. Just start from scratch. And we had like a lot of calls. We kind of went in with a pretty open like problem statement. It's just like collaboration is hard, but where is it the hardest? And where is it a hair and fire problem where there's money, and making sure we're not going in with like leading questions or assumptions. And we reached as well out to like, we obviously had some assumptions around who our ICP would be, right? Like could be a product leader, could be an engineering leader, could be somebody more on the go-to-market side, whether it's CS or sales. And then over time started realizing who really has influence in the organization to pay for this, but who's feeling the biggest pain. It's actually annoying because the one that was feeling the biggest pain did not have the power to buy. The power to buy was all within engineering, honestly, while the biggest pain was on like CS and sales, partially sales, and then also, support. And those teams rarely get tools, honestly, or have budgets for tools, but they're definitely feeling the pain. But we sort of then saw with engineering, what actually was eye-opening to us is engineering also has a problem with lack of context. They don't know why the hell they're doing what they're doing. Like they don't know why they're building what they're building or why what they're building is shifting. And there's a lot of frustration with that because like, oh, we spent all this time on this and now they're telling us to stop. Like, what is going on? So we actually saw, oh, engineering also wants context. Let's focus on that. And that then got us budget from engineering teams, and we're able to bring like CS and sales on board as well. So we just spent a lot of time on calls. We did a lot of listening and making sure, again, that we're not biased. We use Joyn for ourselves as well to make sure we have a more unbiased system analyzing sort of like the results of the conversations. And then obviously the biggest indicator is like, are they going to use it, right? Like, can you actually get them to give a POC a spin? And we were able to do that pretty successfully with like pretty big companies without like many internal hurdles to just spin out a POC. And then the next step was like, oh, and are they going to stick with us? Like, are they going to convert to paid? So there was like all these different things. But I will say that, since then, everything evolved. Our go-to-market, our pricing. And then for baselayr, it was different because it wasn't us going out and doing discovery calls and figuring out what the problem was. People brought the problem to us and were like, can you help us? It was very different because it was pull versus us kind of figuring out where is the pull. It was like, oh, there's pull here. You should maybe listen to this. And again, it came back to listening to what we were hearing, that people had challenges building AI agents and assistants. And we had an infrastructure that has been doing that for that like very purpose-built use case of Joyn. So it was very different. We still did validation, obviously. I think every company has fallen into the trap of doing one thing for one big customer, and it's not something that anyone else wants. And then you have like a dead product that was built for one enterprise that you're stuck with, but it is not reproducible more broadly. So we still went out. I did a lot of like cold outreach, as I love doing, on LinkedIn, and was like, yo, we have this thing. You have an AI agent and assistant. How do you approach context infrastructure? Like, would you be open to look at what we've built and seeing whether we're getting responses and calls? And we did. So it was like started with inbound and us doing outbound and doing some more validation. So it was a little bit different from Joyn because like people came to us versus us finding where the problem is the most felt and then building for that use case.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I bet the folks listening might be wondering how long that process with Joyn took. Like from the first interviews where you were kind of searching out this information to the first POC, or were you doing it all kind of at the same time? What did that look like time-wise?
We did some things in conjunction because there was like certain things we knew we had to do no matter what, which was again the ability for us to like pull in and understand data. We already knew some of the systems, no matter what mattered, like Slack, Jira. Like there was just like this either way we got to do. So let's start there. So as we were having sort of like the discovery calls / interviews, like our engineering team was already off to the races to sort of just build the kind of like architecture layer and some of the key integrations with some of the tools we knew we either way would have to do. So we had like a working POC within 2 weeks after sort of like figuring it out, and then used that as well for further validation. Like we definitely built shitty things first to validate them before investing too much. Like our engineering team knows that whatever they're building might not live for very long, but it gives us more leverage, right, to show something that's more tangible and have people sort of like take us in specific directions. Even easier now because now you have Lovable and whatever to like build prototypes and do early validation. But it always depends, right? Some people are very visual learners, and we wanted to sort of have a next step of, oh, you gave us this insight. Here's like a first version of this. What's missing? What do you need, etc. So it was pretty fast. And then while Techstars is a 3-month program, but I think 4 weeks in, we had customers using the product. So it was pretty rapid for us, but it's also because we built fast and we had so many calls and we got a lot of calls, which was also a good signal. Like people were super, super responsive to our outreach and wanted to hop on calls. And that was validation too, right? If you do cold outreach and people are like, yes.
Yeah, cold outreach is hard.
Like, let me tell you about what I'm going through. That's a good sign. So we just had a lot of calls. It was like, all I did and Kendra, and then, we just real time translated it into some stuff into product, and the Eng team executed on this. And it was all very, very rapid. And we generally operate this way. Like, I think a lot of people make the mistake. They spend way too much time in discovery, like weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks without delivering anything. And I think that's the worst thing that you can make, because honestly, you're building more and more of like a bias and opinion, and you convince yourself so much of the product, which is also like, I think product managers love to do that. They're like in love with whatever solution they're dreaming up, and then they start building the thing, and then it's actually missing the mark because something got lost somewhere. So I think like actively developing alongside the people you have conversations with to keep you in check and like unbiased has been the most helpful to us. And it also helped us build extremely strong relationships. Because like those people are like, oh my God, they give a crap about us. Like she actually wants to make my life easier. And I see what I'm saying in the product. Like that's crazy. Like within, 2 days, we're like, hey, here's the thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel so heard. And I think that helped us too, for people to be really invested in our success. And a lot of the people we talked to, I guess now over 3 years ago, still customers, or they're the ones that like, if they weren't fitted for our ICP, they're still the ones reaching out to us and like, or giving feedback or introducing us to people, like we're on their minds. And I think that's a really positive thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. You obviously learned a lot from your Joyn go to market, and baselayr AI has been a little bit different because you had folks asking versus searching out people. But what did you learn about go to market that changed from when you started baselayr to where you are today in terms of your target segments, your channels, your pricing positioning? Obviously, people were asking for one thing. Has that held true the whole way through as you've continued to develop, or has that changed over time?
I think like the only thing that we really honed in on since launching baselayr is just really focusing on non-native AI companies.
Mm-hmm.
I think initially we were just like anyone that's building AI agents and assistants, like let's reach out. Well, now it's like who are the people that are not AI companies but have to deliver on this? Like obviously now there is like an expectation for basically every company that you can go in and you can ask an assistant question and it'll, tell you stuff. And the next thing is like you can ask the assistant and it'll just do it for you. Like we're definitely customer expectations are shifting. So we sort of were more so honing in on who are those companies where we know that this is a requirement and an expectation, either because of how their product works or how competitors are working, but that doesn't have the internal resources or skill set to build the infrastructure for it. So that was really that's where we honed in on. And that's now where we're working more like, with data teams and AI teams. So usually very technical teams, which that obviously impacts your positioning in terms of like what you're talking about, how your sales process works, and how quickly you get in front of like the right person. And we wanted to get there as quickly as possible. And obviously like one thing that's true for most engineers is that cold outreach on LinkedIn is not their vibe. So we definitely had to figure out how do we get in front of that sort of ICP and that customer. And a lot of it has just been like honestly word of mouth. Some people are responsive to cold outreach. Sometimes it's reaching out to the AI product person and then they get us to the engineering team. But selling infrastructure is very different than selling an app layer, right? Like in terms of how you're talking about it and who you're speaking to and like the questions you have to ask. So it would definitely learn more about what questions do we need to ask early and need to understand, what questions can we expect them to ask us, and where do we need to sort of like get ahead of the concerns or things that they will question ahead of time versus them getting ahead of us. So that's definitely just from the conversations, we definitely shifted how we're structuring calls, how we're doing our outreach, updating our positioning, going much quicker into like, our technical depth and differentiation, and like how obviously the thing works and how it embeds into what they're doing, being very, very use case focused as well, like understanding their domain and the agents we see them needing the most. And being very educated on it. Because like, I think everyone's questioning AI companies around like, how good are you really? Like there's so many of you out there, like what makes you different? So for us to make sure we're putting that right up front of like, here's how we're different from, retrieval companies and why we're not a retrieval system. We're a context system, and that's different. And here's why. And like making sure we have a good pulse on like sort of like the key pushbacks and stuff like that. So I think those were like the biggest learnings and where we sort of like shifted things. It also, compared to Joyn, pushed us even further like up market, obviously, also because the budgets are much bigger for this, because we're basically replacing like 5 or so data architects and 2 MLAI engineers. So we can ask for more money, but it also changes the sales cycle.
So are you guys still using free trials, POCs for base AI as well? And how are you converting folks to paid customers?
So nothing is free for us. I think for us, it was like if there's not a willingness to pay, the value isn't high enough. And we actually did that with Joyn too. We had like a free tier, but it was super, super limited. For larger companies, it was always paid. So I think it was just like, we want to validate willingness to pay right up front. But it's definitely still discounted, right? And we definitely have like POCs over like a specific time period. Right now, we just announced baselayr like what, two months ago or so. So we're still primarily in like the paid POC stages and working very closely with them to assess obviously the quality improvements, the accuracy improvements, and like working with them clearly on like KPIs and satisfaction and stuff like that. So like we're very, very focused on like collaborating with the AI teams to have very tangible outcomes of what it is that we're doing. We usually also, starting obviously with a smaller scope, we're like, what's like 1 to 2 use cases that you want to solve for the POC, just to also contain what it is we're evaluating, but doing it in a way that they can still envision, oh, what does this look like on the broader scale, right? So everything's paid, definitely discounted for the POC. Also, it gives us also an understanding of our pricing structure, because like we're very much like consumption based, because our biggest value add is like contextualizing and packaging up the data. So it sort of gives us a better gist on what to expect as they're like expanding, even though we're sort of forecasting it based on what they tell us. Obviously being plugged into the systems and actually seeing the data structure of the data and sort of what it takes us to contextualize it and package it up allows us to get a better sense of, oh, here's probably where we'll land in terms of charging you. So that helps us as well to not sign us up for like a very underpriced annual contract going forward as well.
Yeah, all that totally makes sense. So as you made this pivot, obviously there's a go-to-market motion there and launching a new thing from something that you already have existing. How did you communicate that pivot to your existing customers and the market, and what did that response look like?
Yeah, I always thought it was like different strategies for different categories. For like our existing customers, like the thing is like nothing really changed for them. Like Joyn still exists. The Joyn has been that it's very like self-sustaining. We don't need to do much work for it. And it's powered by baselayr. Like Joyn really is just an app layer on top of baselayr. So any improvement we're doing on baselayr, which is the infrastructure, benefits Joyn. So they're still getting the benefits of, obviously what we've been doing with baselayr. So we did give them like a heads up, and we're like, hey, this is rolling out. This doesn't really impact you unless you're a customer of both, because we do have that they use us for both things. One obviously Joyn is for internal enablement, and then baselayr is for like enabling their customers to interact with the AI systems. A lot of our customers do both, so they use both. One thing that obviously we did do though is that we shut off our free tier. So any customer we had using the free tier for Joyn, we decided to stop supporting, purely for like focus, honestly. Even though it was very sustaining, we just didn't see enough value to keep free customers using the platform. So we did communicate it to them. It was like, you can upgrade to paid. But we also knew that for these like smaller companies, like where, you're a team of 4, like cool, but what are we going to charge you? Like our unit economics are really good. So we decided to just shut those accounts down. And it was like received well. I would say it was like, we get it. We're startups. We understand the focus piece. Investors were whole different stories, because I think investors were worried that we're spinning out separate entity and like they're losing us, like they're losing their seat on the cap table. So I think like we actually did mostly like investor fear mitigation, while customers understood what it is that we were doing. So yeah, we gave people heads up. For investors, we gave them like a longer heads up, depending on who they were. And then customers get a heads up before the announcement goes out. And then we did like the broader announcement on LinkedIn after. So we didn't want anyone to be surprised, especially if they are on paid contracts and they're locked in for 2 years. It was like, excuse me, like we're on a 2-year contract, so you're going to keep supporting the product, or what's happening? We're like, no, we are. Like, let us explain like how this works and why working on baselayr also means working on Joyn simultaneously. The only thing that shifted is like in terms of our sales, I'm no longer selling Joyn. I'm selling baselayr now. We still have people come to us asking about Joyn and they can use the app layer, but my energy now is spent on baselayr.
Okay, really interesting. Was there anything surprising about that rollout or anything you would have changed? Or are you pretty happy with, obviously it's very new, you're pretty happy with how it's gone so far?
I think we're positively surprised in terms of like how easily people get it. It takes very little explaining around why we exist. And I think that's like
It's a sign of a great product.
it's like everyone sort of like just understands like the challenge. I think obviously the one things we still have to like explain to some people is like, you know, why retrieval is different than the contextualizing of the data. But people like very clearly know why this exists. The positioning really resonated. So I think that was like, again, a good thing for us. So yeah, I don't know. I think obviously, like you said, we're like still so early, and I think we're just constantly reiterating how we're approaching things and how we're selling the thing and how we're messaging the thing and who we're reaching out to. We're still in this like early stage of just like constantly reiterating. The other thing that was different too, though, is like the baselayr launch was when we already had a customer pipeline. So it was more around as we were having the conversations with prospects for baselayr, there was a little bit of a confusion on, well, am I buying this or am I buying that? Because they had a hard time not thinking about Joyn and Joyn's application. So baselayr gave us a much more clear cut go to market for, no, you're buying the infrastructure. Here's how it's set up and what you can expect. Joyn is just an example of what you can do with baselayr. So I think we just needed clarity on what is it that we're selling and what is it that they're buying, right? Where Joyn sort of convoluted the message for the infrastructure buyers. So that helped us. And it was like, obviously, it was a little bit bold to be like launching a second brand that's coexisting with Joyn. Like we knew, you know, might not be the most normal thing to do, but we sort of knew that it was needed to sort of like streamline our messaging and go to market. And it did. So I think that was good. It made even more people reach out for M&A. And we're still like, use the infrastructure, not selling. But I think it just helped us a lot in terms of more clearly showing our value add, which has always been the thing, doing the work in the background, right? Like Joyn is really just the outcome. And sometimes it's hard to understand how we get there. And it just helped significantly with like clarity of like, here's really, really the differentiated thing that we've been building. And here's why it's differentiated.
Do you wish that you had kind of rolled out baselayr first, or are you happy that you had Joyn as an example of what the technology could do first?
I think we should have done it earlier. I think we could have rolled out baselayr probably early this year quite confidently. But I will also say people weren't really ready for it yet. I think we just hit this threshold of people now are building out agents and assistants, and they're like, why the hell is this not working? Like, what is going on? And like, they're now hitting this point of like we need to do something to figure this out. In a way, maybe we could have used it earlier just to have more recognition as people hit that kind of shift. But at the same time, now is like where people are ready for it and they understand it. And they're at a point of pain where they're like, we can't solve this ourselves. So it's sort of like a sweet spot. But I don't know. You know, it's hard to say whether we actually did it at purpose.
It's a hard question.
Yeah, or whether we could have done it earlier. The start to the year was like very noisy for us. There was like so many things we got pulled into. So I think it was just at some point the signal was just so loud that it felt like we didn't have a choice. And that's when we rolled out baselayr.
Yeah. It's awesome. What's your big vision for baselayr and the company? Global solution for enterprises? Do you want to keep moving up market? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, you know, we don't want to jump on the train of everyone raises $500 million and that kind of thing. I think for us, it always comes back to, the value we're creating. AI is ultimately something that is happening, and it's going to keep happening, and nobody has a choice, and all the companies kind of need to go with it. So for us, again, being sort of like the back-end system that powers the AI agents and assistants that customers interact with, like that's really what we want to move towards too. Right now, obviously, because we're still so early, we're very focused, and we're just in North America, also because that's easier from like a data perspective. But yeah, obviously seeing it on a broader scale, multiple languages, and stuff is like something we're excited about around expansion. I think right now, sort of like looking at some of the companies we're talking to, as some of the biggest tech companies like that exist in the States, and being able to say, oh, we're powering, X, Y, and Z's AI agent and assistant. That's something that's exciting, and seeing as well like how well it's doing compared to what they've tried doing in house. I think for us, obviously, it's around, this is all moving so fast, and people are catching up to the fact that there is business in context. The thing that we have is that we have a 4-year head start to people that are just starting out with context, and that we've built something really differentiated. But it obviously keeps us on our toes on like what's next, and like what do we focus on next, and who are we going for, and again, just listening to sort of like the signals and where the voices are the loudest. But yeah, I mean, we obviously want to be a successful company. I ideally want to be a company that can exist by just revenue and not by raising endless funding. And that would be my ideal scenario. But then, yeah, AI moves fast, and it, sometimes you need funding to move faster. I think we've moved pretty fast with a really lean team without raising hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, I think where it gives people benefit is that they can basically buy customers with like brand recognition that we don't have. But we stand our ground with the product and the infrastructure, but we still need to sort of like figure out how are we people sort of like first thought, like first thing that they go to. They're like, oh, baselayr. I've heard of them. I know they work well. Like, how do we build that up? And obviously, yeah, we're still early there, and we'll have to see. But I just like, I want to make sure that whatever AI people are interacting with is creating value, and that it's also being approached from like an ethical and responsible standpoint as well. Because this can all go very, very wrong if it's in the wrong hands, I will say. So I want to be on the good side of AI, not the bad side of AI.
Yeah, good goal to aim for sure. So for other founders building new products or thinking about go to market, what are your like top 3 takeaways that you've learned as you've been founding these 2 companies?
I think the biggest thing is to never get attached to a problem or a solution. I know a lot of us start the thing because we've observed something or we have experienced something, and we're like, this has to change. And sometimes that's true. Maybe the problem's true and it's real and it's something that multiple people are feeling, but maybe the way you think about solving it is not the right way to solve it. Or maybe the people you think would benefit from this are actually not the people that would benefit from this. So I think, like, again, the listening piece, and like as much as possible, trying to figure out how you can stay objective, right? Joyn has actually been really helpful because it was like our objective thought partner as we're going through like product validation. And obviously we still made mistakes, right? But I think the ability to hear something and act on it fast and validate, you have to have such quick cycles in this space. Like, you cannot spend even like 4 weeks on discovery and not have built something. Like, those days are over. And there's also no justification anymore. Now that you have Lovable and Cursor, like, even if you're not technical, you no longer have an excuse. And I think a lot of people, honestly, when you do too much discovery too, you have too much noise, right? You're losing the signal. So like finding your ways of validating whatever it is you're hearing as quickly as possible and scrapping other things, and also making sure your team is comfortable with that. Engineers also get attached to the things they're building. Product people get attached to the things they're building. People get attached to the things they're positioning because it's easy or comfortable or things that they've been doing for a long time. So also building a culture of iteration and letting things go and scrapping things, but celebrating the success of doing so. I think attachment is the worst thing you can do as a startup founder to anything. The people working for you, the product, the customers, like things move so fast that your company is not going to look anything like it looks today in 3 months from now, 6 months from now. And if it does, for the most part, you're probably doing something wrong, unless obviously, yeah, you're hitting the right millions and millions and millions of AR, like keep going, especially if you see growth. But if people are still spinning their wheels and not really seeing any momentum after such a long time, you have to take a step back and be willing to scrap something, even if it's hard. I think conviction is important, but you can't have conviction on something that's like kind of going nowhere. And, with Kendra and I, we have really clear milestones. And I think that's important too. Like, what are the things you agree on and you're accountable to? And if you're not seeing it, what is it that you're doing? Like, we've literally hit points as a startup where, like, in 2 weeks from now, if we're not hitting X, Y, and Z, we need to consider shutting down the business. Like, we've been there, right? Like, everyone has the like panic moments. We had times where we couldn't pay the team. Like, there was all these things that you hear about startups where, but then what is it that you need to start looking into to turn the tides? And if they're not turning, what is it that you're doing, right? I know so many startup founders that kept going because they couldn't let go and like burnt themselves out, ruined themselves financially. So really having ways of having those points of measurements and having somebody that holds you accountable so you're not doing that to yourself, I think is really important. It's so easy to get lost in what you're doing because you put so much into it, right? This is like the riskiest thing people are doing, like financially, emotionally, like mentally. This is the most draining job that there is, probably, at least in tech. Obviously, there's crazy draining jobs in like other fields, but in tech, being a startup founder is like an insane choice. So I think that's the biggest thing. And then, yeah, listening to customer, but listening to the customer, not to the things you want to hear. Like, that's really important throughout.
Right. Yeah. That is all great advice. And I think your point about having someone, your co-founder, in this case, to hold you accountable and be able to pivot and let go of things is super important. And I wonder how much harder it must be for people who don't have that co-founder, to bounce back and forth with as well.
Something that did help me was like talking to founders that are further ahead than me. And like the ones that, I was seed and they were Series A, for example, or they were like multi-times founders. As a first-time founder, you have no idea what the heck you're doing. And you're doing everything, like everything's too slow, or like, if we were, well, I guess we started a second company, but if we were like to do this again at some point, I would do so many things differently. And I would spin my wheels far less on things. And I'd be a lot more cautious of who I'm listening to as well. Because I think one of the biggest issues that I've also seen is like founders listen a lot to the VCs that have not had a job in whatever it is that they're building for many, many, many years. And it's not that VCs don't have good perspectives, but it's not the only perspective, right? And you sort of need to listen, like you need to figure out who to listen to and where to stick to your guns, because everyone has advice and everyone wants to pull you into a direction. But if there's a trusted person, whoever that is, right? If it's not your co-founder, maybe it is like a mentor that's further ahead. Sometimes it might be an investor, right? Like, who knows? We had really good strategic angel investors that were incredibly important for us. But having like a circle of people that just keep you in check and can pull you out of things that you trust, I think is like really, really important. And it's not just around the, keeping you in check or accountable to certain milestones, but it's also like sometimes you get so discouraged because, things are not going your way. And sometimes just having somebody say, that's normal. Like, I've been there. That's where I think other founders are really helpful, especially the ones, again, that are further ahead, to just normalize the stuff that you're going through. Like, I was just talking to an AI founder, and he runs a really successful company from the outside. And I was talking to him. I was talking about go to market and like selling AI and like how it's like the craziest thing to sell ever, probably. Since I guess the internet or whatever. But he was saying how he's been talking to a lot of founders and they're all having the same problems. Like selling AI is, people don't know how to buy it yet. They don't know how to assess it yet. It's changing so fast, right? Like ChatGPT just came out with their company knowledge. And now it's like, oh, how is this different from the MCP? Like things move so quickly. It is like something we've never experienced to this extent. So just hearing that from somebody from the outside and raised a shit ton of money, like everyone's talking about the company being like, no, this is hard. And he's founded multiple companies. And I was like, this is the hardest time to found a company. I think that's been like reassuring to have people like that and finding people like that and finding the people that are not peacocking. Because like what you get a lot of fun is like, everything's great. Like we're doing great. And it's that, no,
Yeah.
like that's just not realistic. Even if your company is doing well, like we have some customers that are companies that are doing well, but their churn rates are insane. And we see this because we're using Joyn and we see how many challenges there are, which again, gave us an opportunity with baselayr to actually power the AI systems. But it is hard for every founder in different ways. And I think just having safe spaces where you can talk about the things that you feel like you shouldn't be talking about, I think that's good. Like normalizing the journey of how hard it is to be a founder is important. And then also surround yourself with people that have absolutely nothing to do with your industry, because that's healthy too.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, it has been so great to talk to you and get these insights, Larissa, and also just to catch up. So thank you so much for joining. Is there anything you want to promote, send people to the company website, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can find me on LinkedIn just by my name, Larissa Licha. There's only one of me, apparently. And then, yeah, it's baselayr.ai and joyn.one. So if you want to learn more, you can obviously find us there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. See you later.